Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where I bring you the latest news and analysis on military and geopolitics. Today we're going to talk about a shocking incident that happened a few days ago in the South China Sea, where a U.S. aircraft carrier warned a Chinese aircraft carrier to stay away from its area of operations.
Do you have any other questions for me, Counselor?
This is a big deal, folks, because it shows how tense the situation is between the two superpowers over this disputed waterway. It's like when your neighbor puts up a fence and tells you not to cross it, but then you see him mowing your lawn. You're like, hey, that's my lawn. And he's like, no, it's mine now. And then you both get out your lawnmowers and start revving them at each other. That's basically what happened here, except with nuclear weapons. So what exactly happened? Well, according to CNN, on March 11, 2023, the USS Ronald Reagan, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that is part of the U.S. 7th Fleet, was conducting routine operations in the South China Sea, along with its strike group of escort ships and aircraft. The U.S. Navy says that this is part of its commitment to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific region and uphold international law. But some people might wonder if this is also part of its commitment to annoy China, which claims most of the South China Sea as its own territory and has been building artificial islands and military bases there. Maybe the USS Ronald Reagan just wanted to show off its impressive size and firepower. Or maybe it just got lost on its way to Disneyland Shanghai. Either way, it seems like a risky move that could spark a naval confrontation or worse. Let's hope that cooler heads prevail, and that both sides can peacefully coexist in this disputed waterway, or at least agree on some ground rules for sharing the fish. But apparently China was not happy about this. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, sent its own aircraft carrier, the Shandong, which is China's second and newest carrier that was commissioned in 2019. The Shandong was accompanied by its own escort ships and aircraft as well. The plan says that this was part of its regular training and testing activities to improve its combat readiness. Now, here's where things get interesting. According to some sources, the Shandong tried to approach the USS Ronald Reagan's area of operations in an aggressive manner, possibly trying to provoke a reaction from the U.S. Navy or test its resolve. The U.S. Navy responded by issuing multiple warnings to the Shandong via radio and other means, telling it to stay clear of its path and respect international norms. The U.S. Navy also deployed some of its FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets and E-2 Hawkeye early warning aircraft to monitor the situation and deter any further escalation. But wait, there's more! The Shandong is not just any old ship. It's China's second aircraft carrier and its first domestically built one. It's also named after a province that is famous for producing kung fu masters like Jackie Chan and Jet Li. So you can imagine how proud and confident the Chinese sailors must have felt when they saw the USS Ronald Reagan, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered supercarrier that is named after a former U.S. president who once said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall!" You might think that this was a recipe for disaster, but luckily both sides showed restraint and professionalism. No shots were fired, no planes were scrambled, no insults were exchanged. The Shandong eventually turned away and headed back to its home port, while the USS Ronald Reagan continued its mission in the South China Sea. The whole incident was over in a matter of hours, but it left behind a lot of questions and speculations. So why did this happen? What was the Shandong trying to achieve? Was it a show of force or a bluff? Was it a coincidence or a planned maneuver? Was it related to Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan? And most importantly, who would win in a fight between Jackie Chan and Ronald Reagan? Well, there are several possible reasons. One is that China wanted to show off its new carrier and assert its dominance over the South China Sea, which it claims almost entirely as its sovereign territory, despite overlapping claims from other countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei. China has been building artificial islands and military bases on some of these disputed features in recent years, sparking protests from other claimants, as well as criticism from the U.S. and other countries, who see this as a threat to freedom of navigation and regional stability. Another reason is that China wanted to test how far it can push the U.S. Navy without triggering a war. China knows that the U.S. has superior naval power and technology than it does at present, but it also knows that it has been rapidly modernizing its navy with more ships, submarines, missiles, drones. But China also knew that if it went too far, it could start a war that neither side wants. That's why China always says that it respects freedom of navigation and international law, even though it doesn't really mean it. It's like saying no offense before insulting someone. China just wanted to see how much the U.S. Navy would tolerate before saying enough is enough and sending a strong message back. It's like poking a sleeping bear with a stick and hoping it won't wake up. But sometimes bears do wake up and they are not happy. China also knows that it has some advantages over the U.S., such as geographic proximity, home field advantage, and numerical superiority. China may have wanted to see how the U.S. would react if it challenged its presence in what it considers its backyard. China is like that kid who always wants to play in his own backyard and doesn't like it when other kids show up. He thinks he has the best toys and the coolest sandbox, and he doesn't want to share. He also knows that he has some advantages over the other kids, like being closer to his house, having more snacks, and having more friends. China may have wanted to see how the U.S. would react if it challenged its presence in what it considers its backyard. Would the U.S. back off and let China have its way? Or would the U.S. stand up and say, hey, this is a public park and we can play here too? Or would they both end up in a big fight that would make their parents angry? That's what China may have been trying to find out. Another reason is that China wanted to send a message to the U.S. and other countries that it is not afraid of using force if necessary to defend its interests in the South China Sea. You see, China has a very big appetite for oil and gas, and it thinks that the South China Sea is like a giant buffet with 11 billion barrels of untapped oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Yum! But there's a problem. Other countries like Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam also want a piece of the pie. They say that China's claim to almost all of the sea is unlawful and greedy, so they have been fighting over who gets what for decades. The U.S., being the world's policeman, or bully, depending on who you ask, has been trying to stop China from taking over the sea by sending warships and planes to patrol the area. China doesn't like that at all. It thinks that the U.S. is meddling in its affairs and trying to contain its rise. So it has been sending its own Coast Guard and fishing vessels to assert its presence and challenge anyone who dares to cross its line. It's like a game of chicken on water, except with guns and missiles. China hopes that by showing off its muscles, it can scare off its rivals and make them back down. It also wants to show the world that it is a superpower that can do whatever it wants in its own backyard. That's why it launched a nuclear fusion experiment that got hotter than the sun. Just kidding, that was South Korea. But seriously, China is playing with fire in more ways than one. The South China Sea dispute could spark a major conflict if things get out of hand. And nobody wants that, right? Right? China may have also wanted to deter the U.S. from conducting more frequent or provocative operations in the South China Sea, such as freedom of navigation patrols, joint exercises with allies, or arms sales to Taiwan, which China considers a breakaway province that must be reunited with the mainland by force if needed. So there you have it, folks, a near miss between two giant countries with big guns and bigger egos. This just goes to show how tense things are in the South China Sea, where one wrong move or one bad day could start World War III. Yikes! That's why it's super important for both sides to talk to each other, chill out, and respect each other's space. Otherwise, we might all end up as crispy fried noodles. And nobody wants that. Peace out.